So just a little bit about me. I have been working with friends a little over 6 months now. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I don't know why I moved here, so don't ask me that because it's really cold. So I have a bachelor's in sociology and a minor in Pan-African studies. I do this work because I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I also like helping the community and anyone who needs it. So today we're going to be learning about healthy and unhealthy relationships. Okay, so who is Friends? So Friends is a domestic violence and sexual assault agency in Washington County. We have been in operation for over 40 years now, since 1978, and we offer free and confidential services to anyone who's experiencing domestic violence and sexual assault. Okay, and here are some of the services that we offer. So one of them is the 24-hour crisis line. This line is available to anyone who's experiencing crisis 7 days a week, 24 hours. And you can also call if you're not in crisis and you have questions about any situation that involves any type of abuse. We will do anything to kind of help you that, and also safety plan. The other service is we offer one-on-one advocacy services. That is basically individual support to victims of domestic violence or survivors. In addition, we offer emergency shelter for people who are fleeing an abusive relationship, as well as transitional living. This program is for individuals who are trying to get out of a household and live on their own. The other services, we have legal assistance. This includes a family law attorney or services, as well as a legal advocate that helps with protection, restraining orders, I'm sorry. And then we also have art therapy. This is a service that's provided for children from 3 years old to 17 years old. And we also provide prevention education to schools. That includes elementary schools, middle schools, and high school. And then we also have support groups for people who identify as domestic violence survivors and sexual assault survivors. Obviously, we're not hosting them because of COVID, but we hope that we can start doing those in April. In addition to all these services, we also do provide stuff like transportation, gas cards, stuff like that, or vouchers for food, clothing. That's just sorts of other additional stuff. Okay, so we're gonna get onto the relationships. So obviously relationships, unfortunately, when we think about the word relationships, we often think it's an intimate relationship. And obviously that's not true, right? We have relationships everywhere. And this is just a connection, association, or involvement with someone, regardless if it's intimate or not. This could be friendships, anything like that. And it doesn't have to be intimate. So anyone is in a relationship, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, it's still a relationship. And today we're going to learn a little bit about how we can manage relationships and how we can spot red flags and help our teenage kiddos how to either get away from these relationships or just support them if they are involved in any type of abusive relationship. So here are just a couple examples of what relationships we have. And those include family, friends, classmates, teachers, husbands, wife, coach, boss, coworkers, and I'm sure there's a lot more than these. So these are just a couple examples. Again, I'm just repeating that some of these relationships can be both healthy and or unhealthy. And so with that, I'm going to present to you the relationship spectrum. And so this spectrum is divided into 3 different categories. The first category here, we have the healthy relationship. And these are based on equality and respect. And as you're able to see, there's that balance, right? There's equality, and both of the people have that respect. The second category here is the unhealthy relationships, and these are based on attempts to control another person. And this is why you have that struggle. This happens when a person wants to control someone else, but that other person does not allow for that control. So they're kind of pushing or pulling against that person trying to take that control. This obviously includes like pressure, dishonesty, things like that. The third category is the abusive relationship, and this is when one person does control or have power over another person. That's why you're also able to see that imbalance, right? Where one person has more control than the other. And so this is more blame. There's a lot of blame, there's isolation, there's manipulation, and other stuff like that. I do want to say that this is a spectrum, right? So nothing is ever in one category. Everything does shift as relationships change. So for example, if you meet someone for a month, you might be in the healthy relationship side of it, right? But as the relationship changes, then you could find yourself being on a healthy relationship and also abusive. And it's never static. It is always moving because people are always changing. And so just kind of keep that in mind. I do also want to say that a relationship, it fluctuates, right? So don't think that, oh, well, I'm in this category, so I must be fine. I also do want to say that both the unhealthy relationship and abusive relationship, there's a lot of things that like they blend. So that's why you're able to see that those colors that are kind of blended, because that's kind of how relationships flow. Okay. So here is just some examples of what is an unhealthy relationship like. And there is jealousy, isolation, there's like guilt tripping, poor communication, lack of trust. Everything that is important, there's a lack of, or more of, abuse or things that are unhealthy. So for what is a healthy relationship like, that's obviously the opposite, where there's trust, there's honesty, there's equality, the communication is good, and there's also common interests. You can see obviously how those are really the opposite. Okay, so here's some of the things that you can do. I call this proactive support. And this is preventative and active teaching and learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by that when I start this one here. So here are some tips for talking to your children about relationships. Obviously, it is really difficult to even have this conversation because, like, who talks about relationships, right? Even though it's something that you do and you have every single day of your life, from when you were born, right? You had a relationship with your mom and your dad or your siblings. And so for talking to the children about these relationships, the first thing that you have to do or you can do is to assess your own relationship values. This is important because if your relationship values are unhealthy or they tend to be abusive, like how you see your relationship with, for example, a friend, are there a lot of fights? There's lying, stuff like that? Like, you really need to be able to look at your own relationships and then be able to talk to your children about it, right? The second one is to reveal the unspoken rules of dating. This is just talking to your children about what it really is expected of these relationships, right? Like, what do you want to get from having a friendship? Is it something positive or is it something negative? Is this okay and is this not okay? Things like that. For the third one is we tell the whole truth, good and bad. And the good thing, obviously, right? It's a relationship. You can communicate with the person. You can share things like that. The bad part of this is that in a relationship, there are going to be disagreements, right? So we're going to have maybe some argument or something that we just don't agree on. And so just letting your children know that that's going to happen. because it's not all, unicorns and rainbows. There are going to be times where we're going to be faced with problems like that. So just kind of, telling them the truth. Then there's like teach assertiveness and not aggressiveness. What I mean by that is sometimes when children are not able to process their own like feelings, it is really hard for anyone to really know what's going on, right? So oftentimes they do tend to be aggressive. So if they don't like something, and instead of them telling you, they just either, I don't know, ignore you or tell you like leave me alone or something like that. So it's important for even yourself to be able to express your own feelings to your children, so that then they are able to learn from that. So like, I'm feeling a little angry right now, or I'm feeling a little like this, and so then they're able to kind of learn that, the assertiveness, so expressing their feelings. For the fifth one is teach anger control. I know this is really hard, right? Because even, and this goes to any age, including adults. It is really hard to, even when you're angry, when you have children and there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes you do want to, you get angry. But it's important to teach anger control, because you don't want your child to be the person who's being having unhealthy behaviors with their friends. And teaching anger control does help in when there is that either miscommunication or misunderstanding, so that they're able to process that different than being angry and hurting someone's feelings because of it. And with that, these obviously are very similar to each other, right? So you teach problem solving. For example, for my children, I don't have any teenagers, so I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I do have toddlers, and one of them is 2, the other one is 4. And for them, like, I teach them how to problem solve when they are, for example, fighting for a toy, right? Like, what can we do? Can we put a timer? Can we do this? And that applies same to teenagers. Because in a relationship, any kind of relationship, there are going to be problems. And if they have the skills to be able to think kind of outside the box or outside of that problem, they are going to be able to sort of have an easier conversation, right? So kind of teaching those problem solving skills. Also, the same applies for the negotiation skills. This is really important because when there is a problem and you just can't agree to disagree and kind of move on, it also helps because you don't want your child to be the person who is always right, who always wants to be right. And if they don't get what they want, then something bad's going to happen. For number 8, we need to help our children recognize warning signs within themselves. So teaching them, for example, and you're able to know like when someone is going to get angry or is about to, something bothers them, and you see either like they clench their, like they do their fists, or you can see them getting red. For my children, for example, like my child starts like stomping and being very, and she starts crying and stuff like that. And so just kind of making the conscious, of reminding them like, oh, I see that you're a little upset. Like, can we maybe take a break? Can we talk about it later? And again, this is sort of active. So it's active teaching and learning. For me, for example, I had to do a lot of learning before I had, when I had kids, because I didn't realize that I had to control, or I wanted to control their emotions, but I couldn't, right? And so I did do a lot of learning, and it has to be active. It has to be every day. So it's just helping them recognize those warning signs before they explode, so that they're able to kind of keep themselves leveled. So for the 9th tip here is sharing and keep no secrets. When children are in a relationship, whether it's intimate relationship like a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a friendship, sometimes they don't want to talk to their parents about their relationships with anyone, right? They're teenagers, they are having their own lives and they're developing themselves. And so they don't really want to talk to the parents about it, and that's okay. But do remind them that when there are secrets that are keeping them isolated or keeping them in a position where they don't feel comfortable, it is okay, and it's what's it called? An example of like strength, right? To be able to utilize that support system that they have, whether it's their parents, their aunts, or anyone like that. For the 10th here, it's to be a role model. Again, this kind of ties back to the first one where you're assessing your values, because it's important to children, regardless of age, are always looking up to their parents, and they're learning from them. And so if kind of looking into our own lives and how am I acting, how am I behaving, and if what I'm doing unhealthy, either to my children, to my spouse, to my friends, and change that, right? Again, this is kind of be active, and it's going to happen over time. I don't expect for you guys to kind of just use all these tips right away, because that's just not realistic. So it is going to take some time, and it's going to be a process, because you kind of have to build on what you already have. Okay, so now is how to start that conversation. Granted, it is really hard to talk about relationships, right? Especially unhealthy relationships, and especially to teenagers. But I do want to say that the first thing to do is to keep an open environment. Again, it's just allowing yourself to, or your family, to express themselves, right? You express yourself and them express themselves, and just having that open environment as you go. The second one is to start the talk. And what I mean by that, for important subjects like abuse or unhealthy relationships, is it is really hard for us adults to even talk about it. I assume that it is really hard for children to talk about it, right? But I do think that it's just that you just have to do it. Just kind of do it. I mean, I'm not going to say that it is easy, because it's not. So make sure that location and timing is appropriate. For example, if you have your children are you take them to soccer, and you notice that one of their friends is not being very nice, and they are either pushing your child or bullying them or calling them names, and you could see in your child's face that they don't like that, right? You don't obviously go and address it right there and then, because then you're just going to make your child feel really uncomfortable. So do the timing and the location are you have to kind of take those into consideration. Wait until you go back in your car and you're driving home, and address it in a way that it's more of like, oh, hey, I kind of noticed that, like, what's up with John? Like, why did he, like, I noticed that he pushed you. Like, is everything okay? And so your child will be more open to discuss that type of question or answer that type of question than you saying like, oh, I don't like John because he pushed you. That's sort of like not open-ended, right? It's just like a statement that you said. You want to be able to have that open environment again. Okay, and also just give your undivided attention. As parents, like from experience, I know that we're always really busy and doing different things all at once. And if you can't talk to your children about, your children wants to talk to you about something and you just can't do it at that time, tell them you can't do it, and then just kind of follow up when you do have the time to do that. The fifth one is really important, is for you to talk to your children at their level, because, so for example, my children, my oldest daughter is 4, and if I want to talk to them about unhealthy relationships, this is not going to be the language that I'm going to use, right? I am going to do it in a way that makes sense to her. So for example, we were watching this movie that I think it's Ralph Broke the Internet or something like that. And his behaviors were really unhealthy. There was a lot of controlling and a lot of power and things like that. And so when we were watching this movie, it was the first time we watched it, and my daughter is sitting there and we're watching it, and I'm like, oh my God, like that is not okay, right? And so then I started asking questions and like, oh my God, like Ralph is not nice, is he? And then I kind of started that conversation, right? At their level, because they're watching that movie. So the other one is talk often. Obviously that kind of ties to the open environment and that when you do it, not every day, you don't have to do it every day, but when you constantly do talk about it as things are happening, you are going to create that environment where your children are going to feel a little more comfortable coming to you and talking to you about anything, really. So for number 7 is understand the questions and answer honestly. This also means that if you don't have the answers to certain questions, say it, right? Tell them that you just don't know right now, but you're going to look at the to find the answer, or you could find it together. A note here is if children don't want to talk to you about their unhealthy relationship, that's okay. As long as they're talking to someone, whether it is someone at school, their friends, their another family member, anyone, I think that's is as long as they're using that support system, it's what's important. Okay, so here, we're not going to read through all of these because these are sort of conversation starters, and I'm just going to say, I don't think they work, right? Because you're not going to go up to your child and be like, hey, so what does it mean to stand up for yourself? These are just some examples, and that depends on how far you're in that communicating with your children. These are just some things that you might be able to ask along the way. Like I said, it's this proactive, like, or active kind of learning and teaching. So that just depends on how far you are in communication with your children about this topic or any other topic. I do want to say that when you do start using some of these tips and kind of opening up that space for your children to talk to you about relationships, you are then going to be able to use like these conversation starters. And always, I do think it's important to use examples and like what's happening in the now. So like I said, for like the soccer example, like if you notice something there right, at school or with other friends or family members, I think that using those real examples is going to make a lot more of an impact than using some weird like conversation starters like these. But obviously, like as if you're reading them, you can kind of have like that background if like that conversation does kind of come in play. So here is another thing that's also important, the helping your teen set boundaries. So there are a couple of boundaries. I'm sure there's more than these. I only wanted to focus on these because as parents, like I myself even do these where sometimes I do want to hug my children, even they're young. So I always like, you know, and sometimes I forget that there should be a boundary and I should learn to ask if it's okay for me to give my child like a hug. Because we're teaching them for when they're older, right? We're trying to teach them that assertiveness, and it's only going to happen if like they learn how to use that either word no, or I'm not ready for that, or I don't like that, it's uncomfortable, things like that. I do know it's a problem with like my family, for example, where they want to hug my children and kiss them, and my children probably have never seen them, or they've seen them when they were 2 and they can't remember. And I always remind them that it's okay. It's okay for you to not want to be touched, and it's okay to set that boundary of like, you know. And I think supporting your children in making those boundaries when in presence of like family members or other people is going to empower them so that they are able to use their words and say no. For the emotional, obviously for teenagers it's really difficult, right? Because they're going through this transition in their lives where they're transitioning into adults. And but we were all teenagers at one point. And what it's important for the emotional part to give them their space, but it's also noticing, you know, if there is depression or other things like that. But keeping in mind that some children do, when they say like, you know what, I don't want to talk about it right now because I am really upset, give them that space. Setting that boundary where like I am like telling you that I don't want to talk about it, and we as parents have to be okay, that's fine, because then that allows them when they're in a relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship with friends, then they're able to use as experience, they're able to use that, you know, I don't want to talk about this right now, and I think I deserve that space or that alone time. For digital, we all want to share pictures of our children. I'm one of them. sometimes my children don't like to take pictures, and I think that most or a lot of teenagers don't want to take pictures, and if they do, they might not want their pictures to be shared on social media. So for this one, it's you asking your child, hey, I took this picture, but can I share it on social media? Or you give them options like, which one can I share? Because sometimes they are going to say, like, I don't like that picture, like I look weird, that's not how I look, I don't want that picture on social media. But if you give them that option of like which picture I can post, then it's also that setting that boundary, right? And also empowering them by giving them that choice. For the material, they all have their things, right? Everyone has their own things, and they are able to have boundaries on those things, especially when they are in an unhealthy relationship, whether with friends, whoever, where sometimes they tend to let them borrow their things all the time. And you reminding your children, like, it's okay, you don't have to let them borrow everything. You could say no. I think it's in school, for example, when there's that one person who's always forgetting their supplies or something like that, it's like, can I borrow this? Can I borrow your calculator? And it's okay for them to say like, no, because whatever reason, and enforcing that at home as well. Okay, so this here, we're gonna go now for supporting your child when there is a disclosure of abuse. And so we're gonna be learning a little bit about the red flags. Okay, so here, some of the obvious ones, right, are going to be like there's marks, bruises, or is going to be physical. The other ones that you might not think anything of it, as like teenagers are going through that transition or that growth. There are some of them that are a little harder to kind of, I don't know, notice. For example, there's going to be changes in how they look, what they wear, their hairstyle, and obviously if depending on what that looks like, you might be able to tell. But paying attention to things like if children doesn't want to do something that they love doing. So let's say that they love playing a sport, and for some reason now they're playing it a lot less. Maybe they are also not spending time with their family as much as they used to, because now they have to spend their entire time with this abusive or unhealthy friendship or relationship. The other one here is also if there's depression and anxiety. Obviously, for that, like, you do want to get them the help that they need, whether it's therapy or counseling or things like that. The other thing will be if you notice that some of their friends are either they have like unhealthy behaviors around your children, or you notice that they are always putting your child down, things like that. We're going to talk a little more about how you're able to handle that, but just noticing some of the red flags will be those. And then also, if your child, for example, is a really social being and they used to have a lot of friends and now they only have like 4 or 3 or maybe none, that's also a sign of concern, because then that abusive or that unhealthy relationship is causing them to be isolated from everyone else. So those are just some examples of red flags. Okay, and so here are some tips that you can keep in mind, or when you're trying to support your child, if they've disclosed that there is some type of unhealthy behaviors that their friends are experiencing or that he's living through. The first one is listen and give the support. For this one is really making sure that they know that it is not their fault. Because they already feel really guilty because that person is probably making them feel guilty. And so just, I can't stress this enough, right? It is never the victim's fault. It is never the person who's being treated badly, it's never their fault, even though that the other person might say that it is their fault, and it can never be justifiable, right? The other thing is if the child does disclose something, but they don't really want to disclose anything else, even though you might have a feeling that there's more, don't push it. Give them their time. It's probably taken them a really long time to even come forward and say something to you. And so just kind of give them their time, and don't be disappointed or blame them. Look, I can't help you because you don't want to tell me, because obviously they're already experiencing that with the other person who has these unhealthy behaviors. So the other one will be accepting what your child is telling you. This one is just believing them. As children, regardless of age, it is really hard for them to feel like they're believed, because maybe the person who is doing that harm, maybe you know them, and you, in your mind, they are the best person ever, right? But you don't really know how they are being when they're alone. So that could also look really different. So you believing them, well, it's a really important step to take when someone is telling you that, and accepting that it's true. So then the other one is show concern. And this is obviously, right, when someone is disclosing something, you are, as a parent, are obviously concerned. But it's important to say it, just to tell the child, like, I am concerned for your safety. Is there anything that I can do? What can I do to support you? And that word, it's important, the support instead of like help, because help sometimes implies like that you're going to do something about it, where support is like you're supporting them in their own decision making. So the other one is also focusing on behaviors and not the person. So avoiding things like, well, I don't like John because he is mean. It's more of like, I don't like that John is being mean. And that is really different, because that your child has a connection or relationship with this person that they might even love or have, as a friend. And so if you say you don't like that person, they're going to feel really bad. So it's more of saying that you don't like the behavior, you don't like that they talk back to him, that they are yelling, you don't like that they have bullying tendencies, stuff, anything that's more of like you're referring to the behavior and not the actual person. This one is also, everything is important here. I'm sorry that I keep repeating that. I should just stop. So avoiding the ultimatums. This leads to a forced decision. So for example, for a child, if this John friend has unhealthy behaviors towards your child, and you tell them, you need to stop seeing John. I don't want you hanging out with him. I don't want you talking to him. And if you don't do that, I'm going to take your phone away. That obviously creates a problem of isolation, because now you have forced them to not talk to John, but now they see you as you're not supporting them, right? You're just making them take that decision. And you don't want that. What you want is to foster that communication and that relationship between you and your children. So there's the be prepared. Obviously, you being here is getting prepared to even start this conversation or continue this conversation. But in the event that a child does disclose more in detail if they're going through something that is harming to them, continue getting that education. You can also there's websites that you can visit. You can even Google, like, how can I support my child if they're experiencing this and that. But also knowing who to contact, whether it's a school counselor, whether it's friends, you are able to know where and how you can help and support them. And finally, there is decide the next steps together. Again, it is really hard because your children are your children, and you've raised them their entire life, right? So you always, as a parent, like including myself, I always have this, like, I want to fix everything. Like, tell me what I can do so I can fix it. And unfortunately, when they're in those teenager years, you really can't do that. Basically their choice. You can try to force them. I've heard situations where a parent has taken their phones, their games, and children are really smart. They're able to even use a smart TV to access like applications that they're able to communicate with a friend that you're trying for them to avoid. They use their computers for school. They're going to find a way to do it because they have created that dependency from that relationship. And so we don't want that. So it's important to decide this on the next steps together, remembering that your children are the only ones who know what's going on in that friendship, and you helping them or supporting them in their decisions is the best thing that you can do. Granted, if there is more things that are extremely serious, like obviously there could be more intervention there. And again, I do want to say that these are sort of some like helpful tips or suggestions you can modify, and you are the one who knows your children and the relationship that you have with them. So that's going to look extremely different. So I don't want to just, sit here and pretend that I have teenage children and I know how to do everything, and I don't, because my children are really young, and sometimes I think that they are like 13 years old, but they're not, right? So that's something that you're able to will be able to tell yourself. If you need or have questions, you can always contact us. So we are here to help with anything. If you have questions about anything that is involved with unhealthy or healthy relationships and how you can assist your children. Again, we also do have art therapy. If your child has disclosed any type of abuse, we can definitely do that. If there is more concern and they require therapy or counseling, we could also refer out. So I think that's going to be it for this presentation. So the next will be just questions. If you have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing now because I don't need.
Also, thank you to Gabriela's colleague, Anna, who is working with our youth in the Germantown Youth Futures Youth Committee tonight and giving a similar presentation geared toward teens. So if anyone has a youth member in that program, we're hoping that would help facilitate some better conversations about all of these topics, since everyone's kind of on the same page by the end of the evening. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to add anything in there.
I just want to add a little, so like, I always think it's important, right, when you're going to have to talk to parents about this subject, but you guys are having the same conversation with the children with Anna. Even just starting the conversation from today, right? Like, what did you learn? How is that, what are some of the things that caught your attention? Like starting the conversation from there and opening up that space to have that talk. I think it will be really helpful if you have children that are in that group, then you're able to, it will be a little easier to start that conversation.
I know in part of the presentation, and this has come up with some parents that I know with their kids, where they see maybe some interaction with their child on the playground and they don't address it there. Are there any tips or tricks for kind of addressing things that are kind of outside of that? If it's, something where you might need to make contact with a parent, or depending on the age of the child?
Yeah, so I guess it depends, right? Like if it's in a playground at school and like they're actually in the same class and things like that, addressing it, I would suggest if it's your child who is being not treated correctly, addressing it with the teacher. Like, I noticed that this is happening. I don't want to say that it's okay for you to go and address with the child's parents, because we don't know how that's going to work, right? We want to keep everyone safe. And I think the best thing to do is, obviously, if you're noticing that right there and then, is you don't want to make things escalate things. So let's say that it's not at school and it's like in an actual playground, that you're not, just remove your child from what's happening, and then just talk to your child, like what happened, and kind of tell them that, like, oh, like, that wasn't really nice that they did that to you, and things like that, so you can start that conversation with them. But if it's at school and a child that's happening with, or I think it's just talk to the teacher first before you even start talking to the other parent, because you don't know how they're going to react. They might act similar to how the child is acting, right? Because children, depending on their age, they do learn from their parents. And so if like that child is hitting, it could be that there might be some of that at home. So we want to keep everyone safe and just talk to the teacher, and then they're going to have their own policy and how they're going to address that.
No, thank you. I know that's always, a tough one, because everyone wants to help, but it's not always the most helpful way to address things and to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, even with like teachers or aides who are in school, like that's what they teach you. Like we don't hit, like we could use this, we could use our words, things like that. But that's kind of how they address that. It's by either talking to the parents. Your child is hitting a lot. What can we do to support you in that? Where if it's like the parents, like, no, well, your child probably hit mine, and they kind of start an argument, and we don't want that. So it's really hard. But I mean, schools, I'm sure they have their own policies and how they can handle those situations.
Absolutely. And I'm not seeing any questions come up in the chat. I will give another couple minutes here if anyone else has anything else to address, or if there are any other kind of add-ons to, I know, or if there are any, I guess, concerns that are specific to kind of the times that we're in. I know it's challenging with some kids having different, I guess, modes of learning during COVID, and more frustration. Any other, I guess, tips and tricks on coping, and just being able to really assess these healthy and unhealthy relationships, as they navigate, more face-to-face time moving forward, or kind of reintroducing back into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little tough, right? Where, I mean, I know there's children who are doing like both, right? Where they're going back to school, and and it's tough because they haven't been in contact with like other humans besides like their own family, and sometimes that kind of creates a lot of stress. It's just really important to, depending on the child's age, kind of remind them, right? Like, and I'm sure parents already do that, where it's like, if someone hits you in school, this is what you're gonna do, this is how you do. And kind of just reminding that as like people are going back to school physically, is just reminding those boundaries, and reminding that what you could do if something was to happen to you at school. So for example, like my child is like, if a child hits you, you tell them, don't hit me, I don't like that. And if they don't stop, then you can go and tell your teacher. And that looks really different for teenagers. And the hitting part could look really different. I do know that there's also like digital bullying or cyberbullying that's happening through like social media and other like games, like either Xbox or whatever games connect to the internet, and kind of just be able to monitor those as well, because there could be some type of unhealthy comments or abusive comments there as well, and just kind of remember that children have access to a lot when it comes to like virtual and tech. So just watching out for those things,
No, thank you for that. Yeah, I know some of the youth have even expressed concerns about parents being concerned that maybe their youth would would sneak out to go and interact with people, or, you know, find other ways around, you know, if they had different ideas of what the boundaries are, and to have those conversations about what the expectations and why, and the communication that you addressed in the presentation as well. I don't see any questions here. I did pop into the chat box. There is a feedback form. These chats are brought to you by suggestions from educators, youth, parents, and the community. So friends was one of the topics, and relationships, as you know, as it relates to just navigating them as a teen and a parent, how to have those conversations, and also you know, as it relates to mental health and a healthy, unhealthy relationship, and being able to just have that, you know, mental stamina to, you know, be your best in your everyday life as well. So please, if you have a moment to fill out the form, there's opportunities to share some suggestions for other topics that you might be looking for in the future. As far as parent chats coming up in the pipeline, we are in talks with some presenters around a presentation that was brought, an idea that was brought to us from educators and parents on equality, equity, and diversity in the community. So we'll be posting some information on that as soon as it's available. We also do have a booster night fundraiser coming up at Roberts Custard on Monday, March 15th, and we'd love to have you join us. The funds that we raised from those fundraisers help support more programs in the community. We're also planning a supply drive at Kennedy Middle School and Germantown High School in the community the week of March 22nd through the 26th, and we'll be posting more details and sharing in the school about those opportunities to help friends out again. And thank you again to Gabriela and Anna in the other room too. We really appreciate your expertise and sharing this information with everyone. You know, we really like to have these opportunities to also share with our community different resources that are available to them should they ever need it, or if, you know, they're looking for other organizations to learn more about. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us and for doing that drive.
It's there. Yep. So more details on that coming soon on our Facebook page. The recording will be available in the next couple of days as well. And also Germantown Youth Futures is a community-based nonprofit. If anyone's interested in getting more involved, whether volunteering at an event or joining our board or just sharing some of your ideas, we would love to talk with you more. And feel free to send a message on Facebook or in some of the emails with follow-up after this meeting. So thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, and we look forward to sharing some time and information with you again soon.